Hey there, Skillet here. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you clicking on the video. It's been a little bit since I've done one of these, and there's a whole slew of reasons behind that. It's a video in and of itself. But I'm back with this one, and it's a little bit different. This is actually a video in response to a question that I saw on GameFAQs. Here's the question. Absalon Awoken asks, hey, so I just got the Ritualist Archetype in the Awakened King DLC and was looking for some build ideas. I tried out some suggestions from articles like these. Unfortunately, some of the items they mention aren't in my inventory. I'd appreciate some more alternatives if anyone has any. Well, as it turns out, I do. To Absalon and anyone else who may be interested, I present you Skillet's Blood Ritualist. So here was the challenge. I don't know what items Absalon was missing. He didn't say in the post. So I've used the Ritualist class as a base and then added items that come from the main game. No DLC items are included in this build. If you have 100% complete on the base game, you've got everything you need. The Ritualist's power revolves around negative status effects, in particular, inflicting those on enemies. I don't want to spend too much time going too deeply into the weeds, but let's hit a few highlights of how all of this is going to work. Let's start with the Wrath damage perk. This is going to add 20% to damage and 5% to your crit chance against all enemies who are suffering from a negative status effect. The Ritualist's Affliction trait is going to make sure that those negative status effects hang around for double the duration. This is where things get very interesting. The Ritualist's Prime perk is Vile, so when you apply a negative status effect to an enemy, that enemy becomes infected and receives 15% more status effect damage. Now when that enemy dies, whatever statuses it was suffering from are going to be transferred or spread to all enemies within 22.5 meters. The second major component of this build is the Merciless Long Gun. It's really accurate and has a high fire rate, but what I'm really interested in is its special ability. Once its reticle is fully compressed, Merciless inflicts 2400 bleeding damage over 40 seconds. There's our negative status effect. And once our target is bleeding, the Twisting Wounds mutator is going to give us a 10% damage bonus. I use Enigma for my handgun because, one, it's awesome, but with respect to this build, it applies the overloaded negative status effect. And the mutator is fail-safe just because it makes that awesome Chaos Driver even more awesome. The melee weapon is the Huntress Spear. It applies the corrosion negative status effect, and with the Vampire Blade mutator, it also applies bleeding. Now, because I'm going to rely on Merciless as my primary weapon, my second archetype is the Gunslinger. The Ammo Reserves trait lets me carry more bullets, while the Swift Shot perk is going to give me bonuses to fire rate, ranged damage, and crit chance for all firearms. So there you have the basics of the build. Merciless is our long gun, and that's going to be complemented by Gunslinger that augments its ranged damage, and also by our primary archetype, the Ritualist, which augments its bleeding damage. To this we add the Ravager's Mark amulet so that we can jack up damage to bleeding targets even more. Then we're going to add the Burden of the Gambler ring. We're going to give up weak spot damage in favor of a better crit chance and more crit damage. Our second ring is Probability Cord, and that's going to give us a big bonus to crit damage. Ring number 3 is the Timekeeper's Jewel, which is going to work with the Affliction trait to increase the duration of the status effects you apply even more. Ring number 4 is the Ahane Crystal, which deals 4% additional damage for each unique status effect that the target suffers from. Remember that our weapons deal 3 different negative status effects: bleeding, corroded, and overloaded. But that's not what really makes the Ahane crystal shine. It's our Ritualist skill, Miasma, which applies 4 negative status effects, bleeding, burning, overloaded, and corroded, to all enemies within 22.5 meters. That's plus 16% damage from that Ahane crystal. 2 last things before we move on to the range. First of all, you can see where my trait points are assigned, and I just want to point out these 2. Amplitude is going to make our miasma area of effect way bigger, and expertise is going to let us use it more often. And finally, we have the relic, the enlarged heart. Use whichever relic you like. I like this one because it lets me heal real fast, but check out the shards. Those increase my crit chance, my crit damage, and my range damage to work with Merciless. So let's see how this works on the range. To start with, I'm just going to dump 1 magazine with no skills. Okay, so this thing capped out at just under 1,000 DPS and it's still bleeding. Let's speed this up a little. Now this thing went on to bleed for a full minute and 20 seconds. You're watching 500% speed right now, and it just keeps going and going and going. And there you have it. 1 magazine without popping any skills did just over 13,000 points of damage. Not too bad, but now let's see what happens when we pop our skills to get that increased fire rate and the additional status effects. Alright, this time we've capped out at about 1100 DPS, which isn't spectacular. You can certainly do better. But again, those negative status effects are just hammering the target. But they're also hammering all of the other targets at the same time. That's just 1 magazine. Now again, these status effects kept on for a very long time. Again, the bleeding lasted for a full minute and 20 seconds, actually a hair more. And when the bleeding finally stopped, that 1 magazine dealt over 20,000 points of damage, and that's just to the one that we were shooting at. That doesn't include the other targets that took damage thanks to those negative status effects. And remember that range targets don't die, so we didn't even see the Vile perk. And there it is. 4 enemies that I haven't yet shot at are taking damage already. Nice. Before we close this thing out, I'd like to make a couple of quick points about how to use this thing during play. There's some kind of cool advantages to this. Take this for instance. Here comes a really big fight. It's that foundry with a bunch of Dran and Fae in there, and they all want to kill you. Pretty tough fight. But here comes Miasma.
Glad that's over.
That was pretty easy for an apocalypse fight. After I cast Miasma, I stepped back out of the room and let it do its thing, and only 1 enemy survived to come out and fight. So you're not doing the highest DPS, but you're doing a ton of damage to everyone in the area, and that is a huge help. Now this next situation is something of a double-edged sword. It's really useful, but you do kind of have to watch it. Since you're running Vile and Amplitude, every time you kill an enemy that has a status effect on it, which is going to be every enemy since you're also using Merciless, you're going to aggro everyone in the area. Now this can be really useful because what's going to happen is you can actually see where these bleeding enemies are. so you'll know who's around the corner or if it's safe to go down that ladder. On the other hand, you could aggro more enemy than you really want to deal with all at once, so just kind of be careful. So there you have it, the Blood Ritualist. It's a ritualist build that uses only items from the base game, so you don't have to have unlocked anything from the DLC to build it. Except the ritualist, obviously. Alright, I hope you enjoy the build. Give it a try, and let me know in the comments what you did to improve it. I'm sure that there's a 1,000 ways that you can make this even better. In the meantime, be kind, and GG's.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, you scrapped at the wrong guy. Whoa!